All right, welcome out. Here we are. We're taking a look at the master the thinking, master the content. We're moving along. We just finished up chapter 6. I think I'll break this down and do a couple of videotapes. Will probably be better that way. Okay. So this one won't be that long. Well, anyways, let's get right into it. Master the thinking, master the content. From what we have emphasized thus far, we always want to go back. We always want to review when we're learning something, especially something complex. Critical thinking requires the development of basic intellectual skills, abilities, and insights. Becoming a skilled thinker can be compared to becoming skilled in basketball, saxophone playing, whatever. These skills can be used to serve two incompatible ends, self-centeredness or fair-mindedness. So you can be a great critical thinker, but not fair-minded, and use your critical thinking skills for ill doing. Skills of critical thinking can be learned in a weak sense, selfish. We focus in this book on developing critical thinking in a strong sense, fair-minded, ethical, honest, all that good stuff. So fair-mindedness requires that you develop a network of interrelated traits of mind. Development as a critical thinker occurs in predictable stages. Engaging in that development is challenging, requiring plan and continued practice over many years. Human egocentrism represents a significant obstacle to fair-minded critical thinking. To conquer our egocentrism, we must understand, exercise some control. All right. So go beyond superficial memorization. So a lot of my students do this. Most students do this. I think students do this throughout school, primary, even though primary is just doing learning patterns and shapes and colors and form and such, letters maybe. Then you get to high school, probably mostly memorization, memorizing facts and formulas and data and so forth, and similar thing occurring in college. Not a lot of thinking. I've been teaching in higher education for the last 25 plus years, and that's generally what I see. Very superficial memorization, no deep learning. All right. As a student, it is important that you think seriously about what you want to accomplish in each of your classes. So here we go. Sometimes the text is oriented towards students, especially in higher education. And sometimes you'll see that more evident than at other times, like this here, right? The problem with this minimalist strategy is that in using it, you miss the opportunity to develop skills and insights you can use for a lifetime. So just memorizing things and regurgitating facts on a quiz, on the test, on a paper, it really doesn't do much for you other than maybe, you work towards the grade, you get a grade, and then you forget about whatever it is that you learned because it didn't have or hold much meaning to you, right? No practical after the experience or after school application, right? You should always be thinking after school, after graduation application. How am I going to use this in the workforce? How am I going to use this in my community? How am I going to use this in the body politic to make political decisions at the city, state, federal level, and so forth? I mean, critical thinking is a great tool that can be used uh, many different ways, many different uh, times and places, and very applicable, very systemic use. If, however, you look at college as an opportunity to learn, develop your mind, seek out new ways to look at things, expand your knowledge, and learn ideas that will help you figure out the problems of your life, you are more likely to internalize a network of intellectual skills, right? These skills will enable you to learn more deeply, more permanently in every one of your courses. With a deeper vision of what you are after, you can begin to practice effective thinking in all your classes. Notice the key words and phrases I'm highlighting here: deeply, permanently, deeper vision, effective thinking, all classes, develop intellectual character, virtues of thought, such as intellectual humility. This is one of the lists I talked about from chapter 2, right? Keep that list in mind because that list, as you see, is popping up all over the place. Anyway, such as intellectual humility, intellectual perseverance, fair mindedness. You begin to improve your actions in every challenging context and situation. You begin to acquire the tools of good thinking and learning. You then go into each classroom situation and learning experience with powerful, critical thinking questions on the tip of your tongue. You ask these questions whenever possible. You will ask them while silently reading, while engaged in writing, while speaking, listening. You will then recognize that the content at the heart of the academic professional subject can be learned only through thinking. You will recognize that when you think poorly while learning, you will learn poorly. And when you think well while learning, you learn well. So if you are serious about acquiring powerful tools for learning, you must be committed to developing your ability to think well, to reason well, to reason your way into any body of content, to organize content in your mind, recognize it through your experience, and assess it using appropriate standards, right? In teaching writing, I always talk about using specific words, specific language. I've often used Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail, and he uses language very specifically, using adjectives and adverbs to really pull out the details and to show more specifically. And that's what you want to do. You want to be able to show as specifically as possible to yourself, to others, especially when you're trying to communicate, right? Powerful tools, appropriate standards. The result in the long run will be poor performance if you don't do it right. Poor learning if you're doing just superficial, your superficial memorization approach, right? Poor learning, poor habits of thought. You will be of little value. There you go. That's a key point to any employer who wants to hire people who can systematically pursue goals, recognize and analyze significant problems, communicate important meanings, and assess their own performance on the job. More important, you will not develop the intellectual, emotional, ethical nature of your mind, which will likely leave you dissatisfied in the long run. Okay. Then we've got, again, I think these, going deeper, thinking deeper, more deeply about whatever it is that we're learning. You want to do these exercises. Try. You don't have to do them all. There's tons of them in here, but do them on occasion, and they will help drive home the material and make it more understandable. You'll take the information in better. You'll learn it better. You'll learn it, or where it becomes a part of you. It's organic. It's a part of your DNA. It's not just memorization, right? Or just listening. Just listening to somebody talk or lecture or just reading doesn't do it. Doesn't do the trick. Learning takes many a go through. I read an education paper that said you need to read something 7 to 10 times, or study something or go through something at least 7 to 10 times before you really understand it. If it's something complex, like maybe religion or ethics or economics or whatever, some discipline that is considerably deep, or American history, whatever it is that you're studying, you probably have to read multiple sources. That's why when I was studying something, say economics, for example, I would read 5, 6, 7 books from various authors, maybe from academic authors to authors who are in the field who are not academic, because then you get different approaches from there, right? Let's go on here. Become motivated to learn. That's the key point. You can go to motivation seminars, you can read motivational texts, you can listen to motivational teachers and whatnot, but it really comes down to you at the core getting motivated. You're the one that has to generate the majority of the focus and the interest and the dedication of time, right? To become motivated to learn what you are studying, you have to understand the connection between content and thinking. If you do what first appears as dull, dry stuff to memorize, there you go, it comes alive. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I was going to school, secondary school or college, maybe the first attempt or so, nothing was really sticking. I wasn't really interested. I didn't find much applicable or seek to find much applicable to everyday life. But many years later, after I was out of college for some time and really got focused on what I wanted to do and went back to college, things really changed. I really started to learn things. I really started to inquire into things and to read a lot and to study a lot and start to mix together the different disciplines, look for threads, connecting threads through the disciplines that would really help me understand things and motivate me, right? From a practical perspective to learn stuff. Too many students and alas, too many teachers, key word, key point there, teachers, right? Fail to appreciate this intimate connection. There's a lot of teachers that can't even teach well. I remember there was either I read about it or saw a video where a student asked a sociology professor, why are we learning sociology? He didn't have an answer. Well, if you ask me a question about why we're learning whatever it is that I'm teaching, I have an answer, because I really thought it through. Students usually don't have to ask anyway, because I make it evident and clear and bring up that point. You fail to appreciate the intimate connection. As an opener, consider this: all subject you study, that is, all content domains, were created by the thinking of humans. They are generated by thinking, evaluated by thinking, organized by thinking, restructured by thinking, deconstructed by thinking, analyzed by thinking, maintained by thinking. I think you get the point. I think you thinking get the point. Synthesized by thinking, transformed by the same, expressed by the same, right? They are learned by thinking, understood by thinking, applied by thinking, right? If you were to try to take the thinking out of content, you would have nothing, literally nothing remaining. So that's the thing. You cannot be a good thinker, a good problem solver without being able to think well, without being able to ask the questions, the right questions, asking questions thoroughly enough, not judgment questions or not preference-based questions or fact-based questions, but judgment-based questions, right? And judgment is critical thinking. You have a problem, an issue, you examine it, you look up information, you have existing information that you know of, you look up information, you synthesize those two together, and then you make a judgment, right? That is the type of thinking that is probably the most valued in the workplace, especially as you move up. You're not just going to be you're not going to make a high salary or a high wage by just memorizing and spitting out memorized facts or quotes or something, right? Understand content through thinking and thinking through content. I like that, the inside out. First and most important insight necessary for deep thinking is that everything covered in college lectures, written in college textbooks, is in the last analysis, the final analysis. Nothing more or less than a special way of thinking about a special set of things, right? That's good. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I did have that highlighted and I got lost or erased or something, but that's a key point, right? There are many ways to begin to grasp the profound truth that all content is nothing more or less than special ways of thinking, ways of figuring out particular things, ways of understanding some set of things through thought. Three ways of beginning to grasp this truth are discussed next, right? There we go. All right. Let's see, where were we? We're on 147. Let's see. That doesn't go on much. I'm gonna do this. Learning any content entails figuring things out within the content. All content in school is content in a subject. All content in a subject must be thought through. All subjects are areas of study. All areas of study are things some people, it's got a certain pattern to it, doesn't it? This explanation. All areas of study are things some people are interested in figuring out. All fields of study have been advanced insofar as people have discovered ways to figure out whatever is being studied. There is no way to figure out something without thinking. There is no way to learn how to figure out something without learning how to think it through. There is no way to learn mathematical content without learning how to figure out correct answers. There's no way to learn historical content, so forth and so on, right? So that is, again, if you know how writing works, that's where the key information is put up front in the introduction or in the opening, the topic sentence, the first few sentences, right? But I think that's pretty important. All content in school is content in a subject. All content in a subject must be thought through. All subjects are areas of study. All areas of study are things some people are interested in figuring out. And most of that which is in school, if it's reading, writing, arithmetic, mathematics, science, psychology, history, whatever it is, these fields of study came about not just to entertain or to give teachers something to do. They all came about for initially practical reasons, right? Hopefully all of them. I don't know if all of them have, but most of them have, because most fields of study do have practical application, especially if you get into the mechanical fields or the sciences, right? You're figuring out how to analyze biological entities. You're figuring out how to build aircraft. You're figuring out how to send a rocket into the sky, or you're figuring out how to solve pollution issues or economical issues, economy issues, ecology. There's the word. Ecology issues, right? All fields of study have been advanced insofar as people have discovered ways to figure out whatever is being studied. So that's kind of what I'm speaking to. There's no way to figure out something without thinking. There's no way to learn how to figure out something without learning how to think it through, right? So thinking, the fact that so many of my students say, I never really thought about thinking, I never thought about asking questions, it's really sad. Because just based on that statement, that all they were doing was memorize. It was rote memorization, right? You're memorizing formulas, maybe PEMDAS and mathematics, or you're memorizing historical dates or historical moments, or you're memorizing a certain language, French or whatever it is, right? Just to memorize, just to pass the class, just to get a grade, to move on, punch your ticket to the next level so you can get into college, and then punch your ticket out so you can get a job and get money, right? That seems to be the very superficial approach to it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to it. There's no way to learn a body of content without learning the concepts that define and structure it. There's no way. Here we go again, right? Similar pattern. We were doing all content, all fields, all of it. Now we're doing there. There's no way to learn a body of content. Notice patterns, right? Here we are, adults still working with patterns, and patterns are things that you learned in elemental, right? Fundamental school there for a reason, because patterns are significant. Patterns show something. Patterns show significance, usually. Not always. Sometimes they show lack of significance. But when you're talking about significance, there definitely are or should be patterns, right? There is no way to learn a body of content without learning the concepts that define and structure it. There is no way to learn a concept without learning how to use it and thinking something through. Hence, to learn the concept of democracy is to learn how to figure out whether some group is functioning democratically. To learn a concept of fair play is to learn how to figure out whether participants are being fair, right? To learn the concept of a novel, right, and so forth, and to learn any body of content. So you'll notice how writing is done right here. Up front, we have the topic sentence or the main idea. This is like your mini thesis. Here I'm teaching you some communication skills, some writing skills. You have the topic or the abstract idea, and then you get into the specific with examples, with evidence, with stats or expert statements or testimony, whatever, right? That's the next section. You'll notice each paragraph does that, right? All right, couple more things we'll look at here. So I'm going to move on. To understand one part of some content requires that you figure out its relation to other parts of content. For example, you understand what a scientific experiment is only when you understand what a scientific theory is, right? So, right, you see that? You go from the topic sentence. Here we don't have much explanation in the abstract, and we go right into the examples, right? So that's generally how writing works, whether you're writing a paragraph, a section, sections, a chapter, or a book. It's all done the same, right? Same format. If you understand what a scientific experiment is, only when you understand what a scientific theory is, you understand what a scientific theory is, only when you understand what a scientific hypothesis is, and so forth. Again, many teachers and students currently approach content not as a mode of thinking, not as a system of thought or even a system of thought, but rather as a sequence of stuff. Nice word, phrase. To be routinely covered and committed to memory. When content is approached in a lower order way, there is no basis for intellectual growth, no deep structure of knowledge form, and no basis for long-term grasp and control. So you're not really acquiring a lifelong skill. You're not learning, you're acquiring temporary information, maybe to pass a test, to write a paper, to take a quiz or whatever it is, right? By contrast, critical thinking, there's your little transition, right? We always look at structure when we're learning, if we're learning how to write. By contrast, critical thinking approaches all content explicitly as thinking. It takes thinking apart and weaves new thinking into old. It assesses and applies thinking. It is thinking about, this is a repetition. And this is another thing you need to do, right? Critical thinking approaches all content explicitly as thinking. When you're writing about a topic, there are always keywords and phrases, right? And those keywords and phrases are repeated again and again. Applies thinking, new thinking, right? Move this over here. Applies it is thinking about thinking, while thinking to make thinking better, more clear, accurate, relative, deep, broad, and effective, right? So we've got so much thinking here, right? And that's what we want to do. Let's see. 40 now. 40 now. How are we doing with our pages? Well, this is the last section. Maybe we'll see how far this is. If learning any content, well, means understanding as a mode of thinking, everything you can discover about thinking offers potential insight in how you should approach college classes. First, let us remind you of 8 basic features of all thinking. Whenever we think for a purpose within a point of view based on assumption. And this is something that we've gone over again, right? Point of view, assumptions, implications, consequences, right? We use concepts and theories to interpret data, facts, experiences to answer questions, solve problems, resolve issues. Here are the elements listed separately, right? All thinking has a purpose, at least one question. All thinking requires information. It requires concepts. It involves references. Assumptions involves implication and a point of view, right? So all of that is very important. Now, let's think about how this knowledge might guide your thinking when thinking through the process of learning forward material. As examples, and again, I'm not going to go through all this. You can pause it and go through all this because this is something that we've already gone over, right? Purpose, information, questions, right? All that good stuff. These are just 3 of the 8 structures of thought that serve, as I said before, this is something we've gone over before. 8 structures of thought that serve as guides for improving thinking. A similar group of questions can be developed for each of the others, right? So that's an important point to understand. Caution, no one can do your thinking for you. There you go. No one can change you but you. There you go. So that refers to not only thinking, but motivation. You definitely want to have people of a like mind, people around you who can help you. Maybe your spouse, or maybe your parents, or maybe your friends, or maybe whomever, cohorts, workers, whatever, of a like mind that can help you. But it really comes down to you. Bottom line, this is what I tell my students. You have to do your own thinking, and you have to be your own main motivator, your main thinker, and your main motivator, right? I love this one too. We are masters of self-deception. It's true. Until you learn that you're deceiving yourself, your thinking is going to be very sloppy, very shallow, very insignificant, very, very meaningless, right? Because you're not thinking clearly. You might be thinking from one particular point of view, from one bias, from one prejudice, from one person or group's frame of mind or reference, right? But to be a really good thinker, you have to be able to see comprehensively, see the big picture as possible, as many points of view as possible. What's really going on? Is this all the information and data? This is all that's going on with climate change? I'll be all right. Is this all that's going on with systemic racism? Is this all that's going on with whatever issue, fill in the blank, right? Little in academic or social life encourages independent critical thinking. There you go. That's how it goes through. Although college offers a wonderful opportunity to establish habits of a lifelong learner, it would be naive to think that all college professors require critical thinking and teach for it, and they don't. All right, I can tell you from personal experience, personal exposure. So that was, interestingly enough, a very short chapter. Right, we got through that one relatively quickly. So the next one is discover how the best thinkers learn. And until then, we'll see you. Until next time, take care.